Director Patel, welcome. Do not feel ill at ease for your tardiness. This is the United States Senate. We are not known for our timeliness.
Apologies, Chairman.
You are fine. We have called the hearing to order, and I'm going to make a brief opening statement and followed by the ranking member, and then we'll turn it over to you for your testimony. This is our first budget hearing for fiscal year 2026. Began the appropriations process. Delighted to have the chairwoman, Senator Collins, of the full committee with us today. She and Senator Murray, I know, are fully committed to us getting our work done, but that is a challenge in and of itself. I welcome Senator Van Hollen. He's a longtime member of this subcommittee. He is the new ranking member of this subcommittee, and I suppose I should say, I won't say that I miss Senator Shaheen, but I enjoyed working with Senator Shaheen. I can't say that because that would be offensive to Senator Van Hollen. So I look forward to working with both of you in this committee as we continue our work in CJS. This hearing will consider the President's budget request for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Our witness today is FBI Director Kash Patel. Director Patel was confirmed as the 9th Director of the FBI earlier this year. He begins his leadership as the FBI continues to combat grave threats to our national security and public safety. I look forward to learning about his priorities for the Bureau over the coming year. I'm especially interested in learning how the Bureau will execute these priorities in the context of the President's budget request. That request is transmitted to Congress last Friday. The skinny budget proposes a reduction of $545 million from the fiscal year 25 levels, enacted levels. This is approximately a 5% reduction. I am concerned by the scale of the cut, especially as I know full well it comes on the heels of 2 years where the FBI's budget was essentially held flat, forcing it to absorb hundreds of millions of dollars in unavoidable inflationary increases. I also know so much of the FBI's budget is utilized in paying personnel. Any efficiencies and savings may have already been achieved because of that circumstance, and there is a challenge in finding other ways to cut additional dollars. Director Patel, I'm concerned that the scale of the proposed reduction could force the FBI to eliminate vacant positions and leave positions unfilled as current special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff as professional staff depart and retire. The challenge of this is the challenge of this committee. Americans and the FBI confront numerous obstacles, numerous things that have to be accomplished. Addressing the fentanyl epidemic and restricting the Mexican cartels that produce and traffic it, intercepting potential terrorists who plot to harm Americans like the attack in New Orleans on New Year's Day, locating and investigating foreign nationals who try to enter our country to steal intellectual property or gather data on national security sites, and preempting Iranian plots against former or current U.S. officials and Iranian dissidents. That's just a few of the tasks which make up the Bureau's mission. Fewer FBI special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff could hinder the Bureau in executing the President's commitment to making our communities safe. Our law enforcement, whether state, local, or federal, keep to make certain these men and women are equipped to counter crime, but reducing the federal law enforcement in my home state, in Kansas, means less support for local police officers and local sheriffs. Also means less support for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. I'm also eager to hear about the Director's goals to reform and improve the Bureau, including the initiative to redeploy positions currently concentrated at FBI headquarters and the D.C. region to field offices, to more fully field offices across the country. That seems to have appealed to me. Director Patel, thank you for your testimony that we're going to hear. I look forward to working closely with you throughout the appropriations process to provide the right level of federal resources to support the mission of the FBI. Senator Van Hollen, again, welcome as the Vice Chair of this subcommittee, and you're recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, and I look forward to working with you on this subcommittee. I want to thank the Chair of the full committee, Senator Collins, for her leadership, and also recognize Senator Shaheen and thank her for her guidance as we go through this budget, having previously served as the chair here. And it's good to be hearing from our first witness. Director Patel, welcome. Look, this is supposed to be a hearing on the FBI's fiscal year 2006 budget request. We're in a difficult spot because we really don't have much of a budget request. What I'm holding up, 46 pages, is the entire budget request of the Trump administration for the entire government. And you can see we've got a short paragraph here on the FBI. That's all we've got compared to the fiscal year 2025 budget, which was submitted. So I would say to my colleagues that we're having a hearing on the fiscal year 26 budget request without an actual request, except for one paragraph, which, as the chairman noted, proposes a $545 million cut to the FBI salaries and expenses account. It doesn't tell us what missions the FBI proposes to reduce or to eliminate. It doesn't give us any sense of what it means for the safety and security of the American people. We're left to guess at that. I would say normally we also get for the FBI alone this information, the congressional budget justification, and we don't have any of this year. We have one paragraph, Mr. Director. And as the chairman noted, the FBI has experienced significant cuts. In fiscal year 24, under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the CJS bill overall was cut by $2.5 billion. It resulted in a cut of 1,025 positions at the FBI. This was before your time, Mr. Director. And under the fiscal year 25 continuing resolution, deep cuts continue, and I understand that the FBI will be cutting another 875 personnel just this year because of the fiscal year 25 request. Mr. Director, you testified yesterday that the President's fiscal year 26 proposal, which is this paragraph before us, would result in a cut of another 1,300 positions. My view is that those will likely do a lot of harm to the FBI's overall mission. I do want to briefly touch on another issue of great importance to the mission of the FBI and the men and women who serve there, and that's the need for a modern, secure campus that meets their security needs and the mission. This is an effort that goes way back, well over a decade. Look no further than the 2011 and 2017 GAO reports on this issue, and if it was an urgent priority then, a new headquarters could not be more urgent now. The FBI is in desperate need of a new headquarters. The current building is literally crumbling with nets in place to catch falling concrete and debris. Mr. Director, I'm glad from your testimony yesterday that you have taken notice of this, and you stated in that testimony that the Hoover building, quote, is simply unsafe for the FBI personnel. I completely agree. We also know from GAO reports that the Hoover building does not meet the security needs of the FBI, and that significantly more security requires a setback campus, not one located in the middle of downtown Washington, D.C. That's why, after a years-long transparent and open process, the GSA selected a site for the new headquarters in Greenbelt, Maryland. That decision was final, and it was made clear that it was the best site that met the needs of the FBI. So, Mr. Director, I hope that in the coming weeks we can discuss the importance of that new headquarters. I also look forward to hearing how the FBI will be implementing its proposal to relocate up to 904 vacant positions from the National Capital Region to unfilled slots in the field. I appreciate the fact that the Baltimore field office would get 40 of those positions. Baltimore has seen a drop in violent crime, but we always need to do more. And in closing, I just want to thank the 35,000 FBI employees for their tireless dedication and service to our country. We continue to ask them to do more with less, all while their invaluable work keeps us all safe from harm. And so we must ensure that they have the resources that they need to complete their mission. Dr. Patel, Director Patel, I look forward to your testimony.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you very much, and we now recognize the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel.
Thank you so much, members of the committee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, and all the committee, subcommittee members. It's truly an honor and a privilege to sit here as the 9th Director of the FBI. It is something that was quite unimaginable to me growing up as a child. And as I sit here, I'm humbled by listening to you and your colleagues yesterday, and both looking forward to our conversation today. President Trump has set new priorities and a focus on federal law enforcement. I'm here today in full support of the President's budget, which reprioritizes and enhances our mission of law enforcement and national security. We're fighting for a fully funded FBI because we want a fully effective FBI. We want an FBI in support of the President's budget that puts law enforcement, fighting violent crime, and national security first, and that does only those things and nothing else. We have, in my approximately less than 3 months there, I have sensed a renewed vigor within the men and women in the FBI, both at the 1811 status, IAs, SOSs, and across the country and around the world. A few quick highlights since I became the 9th Director. We've taken 3 of the FBI's most top 10 wanted fugitives in the world, 3, and apprehended them from around the world, to include terrorists, gangbangers, and those who wish to do more harm to our children than any other criminal on earth. We've joined with our interagency partners around the country in many of your home states to detain and arrest violent fugitives and criminals who are pouring fentanyl into our country, committing gang violence, and robbing our banking systems with high levels of fraud. We have also partnered with folks down in states like Florida to seize just a few weeks ago 20 metric tons, that's 44,000 pounds of illicit drugs, mostly cocaine. We kept $500 million worth of narcotics off the street in that one seizure alone. We've also reprioritized, or it's a priority of mine, to go after those with the full force of the FBI that harm our children. Just yesterday, we announced the summary successes of what we call Operation Restore Justice. In the last month, we targeted any individual in this country who is harming our children through extortion rings, through sex trafficking, or through other violent criminal activities. In the last month, we've arrested over 400 individuals committing violent crimes against our children. As I stated yesterday with the Attorney General, if you harm our children, you will receive no sanctuary. Just this last week, we arrested over 200 violent criminals effectuating acts of violence against our children, and we will not stop. Operation Restore Freedom has just started. We need to double down on other criminal threats as well, to include national security. Our foreign adversaries, foreign spies, are infiltrating our networks and our cyber technology capabilities. We need to bolster those capabilities and bolster the toolkit that the men and women have to augment and protect this nation. Foreign and domestic terrorist plotting against innocent Americans must always remain a high threat priority, and we are vigilantly watching that, and we will not diminish our capabilities on that front. The operational tempo that the agents and analysts and SOSs and support staff at the FBI put in every day is truly awe-inspiring. We have forensic examiners, we have linguists, we have computer scientists, we have people translating languages from around the world 24/7 just so we can digest and get to you, the elected members of the United States Senate, the information you need to help us achieve our mission. One of the shining examples of our mission is our Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is situated in all 55 field offices across this country. Having worked in our Joint Terrorism Task Force on a lot of the terrorism cases I handle, it is one of the most effective ways to combat our nation's biggest threat. Another example, modeled after the Joint Terrorism Task Force, that I have focused on is countering narcotics, because I believe it is the bedrock of what allows these narco traffickers to commit such heinous acts of violence in America. Our Counter Coordination Fusion Cell out in Arizona, also known as the Southern Border Intelligence Center, has been fully staffed for this mission set alone. And it doesn't just cover the Southwest. It's there because of its geography, but it covers the entire mission. Under my leadership, we have put internal processes under the microscope, and we have streamlined operations. We've also looked at duplicative contracts and found that there are FBI contracts that pay multiple folks to do the exact same thing. So we're trying to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse on our I'll speak to the redeployment of assets during the question and answer period here today, but I just want to make sure and leave you with this. Building the infrastructure in the future of the FBI is just as important as building the manpower of the FBI and keeping it going. And I want to work with you as I navigate through my first appropriations process, and will highlight to you that I am not the expert on it, but I need your assistance and we need your support at the FBI. The men and women there deserve it, but more importantly, the men and women of America need it. Thank you.
Director, thank you. Thank you for your presence here today, and I'll call now upon the Chairman of the full committee, Senator Collins, for her questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to salute you and the ranking member, Senator Van Hollen, for your leadership, and also recognize Senator Shaheen for her many years of service and leadership on this committee. Director Patel, when you and I met in my office prior to your confirmation, I described to you a terrible problem that we have throughout rural Maine, and that is the proliferation of illegal marijuana operations connected to transnational Chinese criminal organizations. These grow houses are destroying homes. They're threatening our communities, our public health, and our national security. When I asked your predecessor, Director Ray, about this issue at last year's hearing, he confirmed the connection between these illegal marijuana grow operations and Chinese criminal organizations. Now, Maine's county, particularly our sheriffs, local and state law enforcement are working hard to shut down these grow houses, but they need more help from the federal government to help identify connections to money laundering, human and drug trafficking, and other criminal activity. Has the FBI developed a strategy and dedicated resources toward combating these illegal marijuana grows that are tied to transnational criminal organizations in China? And I would point out that the state of Oklahoma is also disproportionately affected, but these grow operations exist in more than 20 states.
Senator Collins, I remember our conversation vividly and took it to heart, and I appreciated your, I highlight our conversation as one of those examples of allowing me to be educated on what is effectuating citizens across this country. And I use it as an example of we can't quarterback that operation from Washington, D.C. alone. So what we've done since I've taken the seat as the director of the FBI is reprioritize assets to push out into the field to cover down in not just pieces of Maine, but all of Maine. And when we finish this redeployment cycle, hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months, we will not only just have the manpower in the field, but at headquarters, I've prioritized intelligence collection against the CCP that is directly tied to these marijuana grow houses. We have numerous new investigations open on just these matters alone, but the field is telling me what you're telling me. We need more folks out there. I'm trying to put them out there as fast as I can, but I also can't cripple the needs in Washington, D.C., so we're doing it in a timeline fashion of 30, 60, 90-day pushes as best as we can.
Thank you. I hope that we can come up with a strategy that involves DEA, the FBI, our sheriffs, everybody involved. There's still more than 200 of these suspected houses that are the illegal growing operations. Second question that I want to ask you has to do with a questionnaire that was sent out to FBI employees prior to your confirmation by the acting leadership at the Department of Justice. The intent was to scrutinize the operations of the FBI's employees, but it also had a chilling effect because agents were asked to identify investigations and cases that they've been involved with, including if they had been involved in investigations of individuals who were involved in the violence that occurred at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Once the Attorney General was confirmed, I wrote to her and urged her to ensure that all such evaluations be done very carefully and not result in unfair adverse actions against FBI personnel, who, after all, do not pick, for the most part, the cases. They're assigned cases, and they've dedicated their careers to public safety. Have you taken any further action to scrutinize the FBI personnel for their involvement in certain investigations? And has the questionnaire that was sent to field employees led to any subsequent adverse personnel actions?
Thank you, Senator. I think you're referring to two separate questionnaires, let's call them. One relates to January 6th and one relates to providing an update to your supervisors as to what you're doing or on a weekly basis. Addressing the first one related to January 6th, no one has been adversely impacted nor will be at the FBI under that mandate because the same guidelines will always be adhered to. You will not be removed from your employment at the FBI unless you violate the law or your ethical guidelines. On the January 6th matter specifically, Senator, it's currently in litigation with the Department of Justice, so I'm limited in what else I can say about that because it is with the court, the federal court. On the email, I believe you're referencing since I came in, about the work to the workforce, directing them to highlight, I think it was up to 5 things they were doing. When that came in, I was the FBI director, and I immediately put a halt to that. I also worked with our Department of Justice and our White House and said, due to operational needs, we cannot force our employees to provide such information. So that's how we addressed it, and we also left an opportunity to all employees, should they find a desire to send that information, to do so to their supervisors on a classified system and work it up through their chain of command, but we are not mandating it for anybody.
Thank you.
Senator Collins, thank you. I now recognize the ranking member, Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Senator Collins's question regarding, reports that a lot of the FBI investigators involved in reviewing the cases for January 6th were going to be purged. The Vice Chair, Senator Murray, myself, and many of my colleagues on this subcommittee wrote Attorney General Bondi a letter on February 8th. We've not gotten a response from them. That letter was directed at exactly this issue. Director Patel, can you track down that letter in the system and work with the Attorney General to get us a response? We wrote on February 8th about exactly the issues that Senator Collins just raised.
I'll track it down, sir.
Okay. Well, I would. We will be hoping to get a response and insisting on a response. Let me ask you about the spend plan for fiscal year 2025. I mean, this is supposed to be a hearing, I know, on fiscal year 2026 budget. I said we got a little paragraph from the FBI about that. But one of the things this committee and the law requires are spend plans for the current fiscal year. In fact, when we passed the continuing resolution, we required that agencies provide their spend plans for fiscal year 2025 within 45 days of enactment. We're now 54 days after that, and we've gotten nothing from the FBI. This is a typical spend plan. For example, this is for fiscal year 2024, the most recent fiscal year. Director Patel, will you comply with the requirement that the FBI submit a spend plan?
Senator, I will comply with the requirement, and I believe I have to work with OMB on the apportionment of that, so we're working on that.
Can you give us a date? The fiscal year's 25 is, ticking away. Can you give us a date by which we'll get the spend plan that's already overdue?
I'll speak with OMB and get back to you on a date this week.
So the hang-up right now is OMB?
It's an interagency process, sir. I'm working through how to get these spend plans
But the
forward.
ball is in OMB's court right now, not the FBI's court, is what you're telling me?
It's in both of our courts, sir.
Okay. Well, right now, as one of the lead law enforcement officers, you're out of compliance with the requirements of the law. So I hope you will lead by example and get it to us. With respect to the congressional budget justification here, we don't have one. In other words, we have your one paragraph. We usually get, as I mentioned in my opening statement, a full justification, which helps this committee do its work in terms of putting together the budget. Can we, I believe that's within the entire domain of the FBI. Can you commit to getting us the budget justification for the FBI?
I will work with the department to do that.
Okay, so that's a yes?
I will work with the department. I have to report to DOJ on that and work with them to get you that plan.
All right. Well, I'm glad we are holding this hearing, but we obviously, Mr. Chairman, we really don't have a budget to work with. Let me ask you about your testimony the other day in the House, Mr. Director, where I think you conceded that the budget request, as skinny as it is, was really not adequate to meet the mission. In fact, I think you testified that you would really need another $1 billion. So would you agree that this budget that's been submitted is inadequate to meet the needs, and that your testimony yesterday about it, that another $1 billion are required to meet the mission? Is that your view?
Senator, I think my view is that we will make and agree with this budget as it stands and make it work for the operational necessity of the FBI. And as the head of the FBI, I was simply asking for more funds because I can do more with more money.
Well, I understand that OMB has a say in this, obviously, but I think your testimony yesterday was important and revealing that as the director, you believe that another $1 billion over and above the current level is really necessary to complete the mission. And it does put this subcommittee in a difficult position because really we rely on you and others to persuade the OMB and the president to submit a budget that meets the needs and requirements of the FBI. And clearly, at least based on your testimony in the House, you don't think that that's happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. Let's talk about that reduction of $545 million to the FBI base resources. It's certainly true we don't have a budget. Certainly the conclusion that with what we have, it made sense to proceed with these hearings so that the appropriations process can continue. And we look to Director Patel to help fill in spaces as to what is going to occur based upon what he knows, which presumably is maybe significantly more than what we know is the plan at the FBI. The document that we've received asserts that savings, this $545 million, can come from reductions in DEI programs, pet projects of the former administration, and duplicative intelligence activities. Is that accurate? Is that capable of being done, that we can find this in what I suppose most people around here call waste, fraud, and abuse? Or does it have real consequences to the level of personnel and the capabilities of meeting the mission of the FBI?
Well, I think my job, Senator, is to make sure we can find it. We've identified a lot of it already, and we'll continue to do it irrespective of where the budget lands, because we can't have waste, fraud, and abuse. But I'll make the mission work on whatever budget we're given.
But that means lowering the mission, right?
I think right now where we are, Senator, is that stepping back from 432 years ago, there's vacancies at the Bureau that have been held vacant for a number of years. So while the Bureau is on the books for 38,000 folks, over the last 3 years and 2 years, that has been attrited down to about 35 and change, because those vacancies have gone unfunded. And so we're not in a position right now to say, let's just hire 3,000 people back. We couldn't do that if we even had the money tomorrow. That would take quite some time. And so we have been working on the numbers that we currently are at. And I think the budget that we've put forward would not force me to remove active duty line agents is the mission I'm protecting against.
Director, when you say the budget we've put together, you're talking about the skinny budget that we've
Right.
seen? Okay. What more would you be able to do if you're able to fill those vacancies?
If we were able to fill those vacancies, we would continue expanding upon the project that I started about reorienting assets across America and growing our facilities in places like Patel and Redstone and West Virginia, where we have CGIS and some other campuses. So those are things we could do.
Tell me what concerns you or I or the rest of us should have in the departure of senior members if the budget is insufficient to fill positions. How do we keep senior officers from retiring?
I think, Senator, it's a problem everybody has. If people want to retire, they're going to retire. The good news is, from the folks that I've met in the Bureau, we've been able to retain significant levels of senior leadership, both in Washington and throughout the country. And so I think with the renewed mission that we have under this administration, folks are just standing in line to continue to take on the mission set, and they've adjusted over the last few years to doing more with less.
Director, I don't think it's part of the skinny budget, but there's a proposal afoot to increase the number of years, the calculation from 3 years to 5 years on retirement benefits. I'm told that has a consequence on people who are already eligible to retire, would perhaps decide to retire now despite their commitment to the FBI or other law enforcement agencies. Is that a concern?
Senator, I'm not read up on that, so I'll have to get back to you on that one specifically.
And then finally, let me ask about the cooperation. What's your relationship, what's the FBI's relationship, your relationship as the director with other federal law enforcement agencies? It's always been my goal, and I've only succeeded once when I chaired this subcommittee before, to have not only the FBI director appear before us, but also DEA, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals. Would you, in their absence this morning, because they're not capable of being here, would you give us your rundown on the relationship between the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies? What's the level of cooperation, and are they doing the job that helps you do yours as well?
It's incredible, and I'll just give you a simple example, Senator. One of the initiatives that we stood up at the FBI was the Homeland Security Task Force, and the first place we took it was the state of Virginia, just because of geography. And what we did was DEA, DHS, FBI, HSI, state, local authorities, Virginia state authorities, all nested in an FBI facility in the state of Virginia to cover down on what we call their first operation for Homeland Security Task Force. And it was a simple phone call to the leadership at the DEA, at DHS, at FBI. And I said, hey, I need 20 guys and gals here. I need 40 guys and gals here. And the governor said, we're going to give you 50. And what we did in 1 month was arrest 500 individuals and violent felons in the state of Virginia. And that's, to me, speaks to the quality of the relationship we have across the interagency, and we want to take that model to other states across this country, and that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you, Director. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Van Hollen and Chairman Collins, and thank you all for your nice comments. Welcome, Director Patel. The recently released 2025 Worldwide Threat Assessment identifies Chinese, Russian, and Iranian malign influence activities as continued problems that jeopardize U.S. democracy at home and leadership abroad. So I was concerned when I heard about the decision to dismantle our efforts to combat disinformation and misinformation, including the FBI-run Foreign Influence Task Force. So with the dismantling of this task force, how does the FBI intend to continue to combat malign influence campaigns, which is the threat identified by the intelligence community?
Thank you, Senator. To put it most simply, that mission set is something that multiple divisions in the FBI do 24/7, nonstop. That's been my experience since I got there. They've been because of the malign influence campaigns and because of the prioritization and the intelligence apparatus to collect against them, we have been covering down on that as a priority one nonstop. And so I see it every day in my briefings, I see it every day in the field, and I see it in the cases and indictments we bring. So I don't know that I can't speak to it before, but I haven't seen it slowed down since I was here.
Well, you gave an impressive list of some of the accomplishments of the FBI since you took over. There was nothing about disinformation and misinformation on that list that I heard. Is there anything that you have seen in the time that you have been at the FBI that would suggest that you're continuing to make inroads to address that issue?
In terms of faulty intelligence collection, ma'am?
No, I'm in terms of disinformation and misinformation campaigns by our adversaries that are being used to disrupt activities in the United States, to sow divisions, to undermine our national security, to undermine the security of American citizens?
Understood. I see that on a daily basis, the FBI adjudicating those matters based on the intelligence we receive and attacking the problem sets, not just here in the homeland, but abroad where they originate. And we are also using our cyber capabilities and our intel capabilities to thwart those adversaries' abilities to penetrate infrastructure, including social media, to put those campaigns on.
It would be helpful to get a briefing at some point
No
about
problem.
what you're seeing with respect to the ability to disrupt those campaigns that are going on in the United States. Along those lines, Congress passed the Foreign Agents Registration Act to help Americans better understand the sources of information and disinformation that we're getting from our adversaries abroad. Again, I saw that the Department of Justice will no longer investigate possible FARA violations outside of traditional espionage activities. So can you explain to me how you distinguish traditional espionage activities from FARA violations in those investigations? And again, in light of the 2025 threat assessment that still identifies those Russian, Chinese, and Iranian malign influence activities as a threat, doesn't this give a green light to those nations to increase their use of agents in the United States?
I can't speak to the disposition of the Department of Justice and FARA. I'll leave that to them. But what I can tell you when it comes to who opens cases and how, whether it's adversarial, foreign adversaries or anything on the homeland, the line agents in the field have their dialogue, and they simply open cases and investigations whether or not there is a legal and factual basis to do so. And based on that, the amount of cases and investigations we are currently running to thwart adversarial operations inside America and those that attack American facilities outside of America, I see on a daily basis. I've not seen a downtick in that whatsoever.
Well, again, I would appreciate a briefing
No
at
problem.
some point, and maybe the committee could request that. Let me just ask quickly a final question, because you mentioned the scourge of fentanyl in your opening statement, which we've seen too often in New Hampshire and across this country. And I wonder if you could speak to the activities to address what's happening with social media platforms, which is where so many people are getting fentanyl, and they're coming. People buy them thinking they're buying some other prescription drug, and what they get is fentanyl. So can you talk about what you're doing to address that?
Absolutely. I could talk about that for hours, but I'll try to do it in a minute. Just to put it in perspective, in these last 3 months versus the first 3 months of last year, the FBI seized last year 620 kilograms of fentanyl. In these 3 months of this year, we have seized 840 kilograms of fentanyl. That's enough to kill hundreds of millions of people. And specifically, we've taken to the streets in every single state, including New Hampshire, where we received 2,100 grams of fentanyl in these last few months. And what you highlight is one of the critical things that I'm focused on in how the distribution of fentanyl occurs to our children. And so what we are doing is using our online capabilities and our online platforms to offensively go after those that are fashioning fentanyl in a form that's appealing to our children. But the most important thing that I'm focused on when it comes to fentanyl in that I launched when I first got there is not just the narco traffickers that distribute the fentanyl here in North America, but no one's gone after the precursor companies and the production in mainland China. I launched that operation the first week I got there, and I'm working with our interagency partners on banking to shut down the precursors in our allied nations across the world that receive those precursors. If we shut that down, there's no version of fentanyl coming to America. So we're doing it from both ends.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and thank you, Director Patel, for being here. I know on April 17th you traveled to West Virginia to visit the CGIS facility. I'm sorry I couldn't join you there. I had a conflict. But for those of you who are unaware, this is where all of the background checks, but also the fingerprint for purchase of firearms. And the numbers are quite staggering when you see how many applications are processed every month. I think it's amazing the work that they do out there. I would like to know, the employees out there really appreciated your visit. You've already mentioned that maybe some of the diffusing of some of the DC FBI would be going to, hopefully, into the Clarksburg facility. What was your impression when you were there, or do they have the resources to do everything they need to do? There's a DOD facility right next door where they use information, share information. Just what was your general impression, and how can we get the resources there that they might need through this budget?
Thank you, Senator. My general impression aligns with yours. I was wildly impressed with the work that's done out there. It's the unsexy work that the FBI does on a daily basis, whether it's gun background checks, national criminal information background checks. State and local law enforcement relies on us, and every time they have a traffic stop to call in and adjudicate the individual they're confronting, or when they're going to get a search warrant. We have about 1,000 acres out there, if I'm correct.
Correct.
It's a beautiful property. It is available for expansion. We are almost maxed out when it comes to how many people we can currently put there. We are putting some more folks there throughout this reorientation program. But, you can never have enough computer data being ingested. And what I'm working on specifically to improve CGIS, which will improve the work that happens in every single state, is the reporting in data cycle from state and local authorities. Because without that, CGIS doesn't work. It only works as well as with our state and local law enforcement. So I'm working on that to move to some of those folks and make sure that they are reporting in. But we would love to continue to expand the footprint there.
Well, anything we can do there, I think the work they do is phenomenal, and I know it's been increased over the last several years because of the new requirements that we had in the School Safety Act to be able to look at juvenile records for the 18 to 21-year-olds, which I think has been a very successful effort and prevented several hundreds of people from obtaining a firearm that really should not be eligible for that privilege. So thank you for that. Drugs obviously is a huge issue in our state and our country. I know that when you mention the obstruction of child traffickers, everything's tied to drugs. It's the purveyor of the money. It provides the money for people to be able to traffic and abuse children. I mean, the drug, if you ask a local judge, how many % of cases do you have in front of you have some intersection with drug abuse or selling drugs? It's 80%. So I would encourage you to do everything, and you are, to prevent the drug smuggling and working against the transnational criminal organizations. Are you finding when you got there, are you finding you have enough capacity it's such a far-reaching and daunting challenge. Do you have the capacity within this budget to be able to be as aggressive as you want to be?
Ma'am, I think we do. What I am working on is changing how we apply AI to the ingestion of information we have. We simply cannot hire enough human beings to triage the data that's coming into systems like CGIS. We need to rely on private sector engagement to work with the FBI so that we can triage what is not useful and focus on what is. And I think that's what we're doing within our limits here.
Let me ask you just a quick question. I don't know, I know you're in a constant hiring position because people leave, people retire. Maybe you're not hiring up to the 38,000 that you said, but you want to keep a steady flow here. Are you finding, I think law enforcement over the last several years really suffered from a lack of interest or even people weren't even applying for jobs in certain like Border Patrol and local law enforcement because of the besmirching of that terrific occupation of law enforcement and keeping us safe. What are you finding in your recruitment efforts?
So in terms of recruitment's been a big focus, ma'am. Thank you for asking. Over the last couple of years, the average application pool per month for 1811's Federal Bureau of Investigation new agents per month was about 2,700. In the first 2 full months that I've been the FBI director, we have doubled that to 5,700 applicants per month, which is a record for FBI history.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito. We're privileged to have the ranking member, the vice chair of the full committee with us today. Senator Murray, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair Moran. It's good to work with you and Ranking Member Van Hollen in this new position, so look forward to both of you and the work on this committee. You know, the FBI does really crucial work to keep our nation safe, whether it's stopping criminal organizations or domestic terrorists, protects our nation's secrets, it prevents cyber attacks, keeps our children safe from harm, and a lot more. So this is really sober work with extremely high stakes. And I'm concerned that instead of focusing on the incredibly important mandate to keep Americans safe and to help impartially enforce our laws under your leadership, Director Patel, the FBI has been weaponized to go after Americans who disagree with the president. FBI resources have been diverted away from combating terrorism to focusing on immigration requests. And all of this, the diverted missions, the fewer resources, fewer agents, heightened politicization, is happening now under your watch, and it is, I believe, making Americans less safe. Now, let me just start with the budget. As Ranking Member Van Hollen noted earlier, this hearing is being held without the FBI's fiscal year 2025 spend plan and a full budget request for fiscal year 2026. The spend plan is required by law. It was due to Congress over a week ago. We have not yet seen it. That is really absurd. The FBI is our nation's leading law enforcement agency, a budget of $10.7 billion. It is critical that we understand how you are spending taxpayer dollars. So, Director Patel, when should we expect this FY25 spend plan for the FBI? Have you seen it? Have you reviewed it? When will we get it?
I'll get you an answer, ma'am. I don't have a timeline on that.
It was due last week by law.
I understand.
And your answer is you just understand. You're not going to follow the law?
My answer is that I am following the law, and I'm working with my interagency partners to do this and get you the budget that you are required to have.
And you have no timeline?
No.
Well, we also need a full budget request, not a single paragraph full of wild talking points that we saw with the skinny budget proposal. We're now having a budget hearing without a budget request. So, Director Patel, where is the FY 2026 budget request for the FBI?
It's being worked on, ma'am.
Have you reviewed it? Have you approved it?
Not yet.
When will we get it?
As soon as I can get it from my interagency partners and get it approved.
6 months from now?
I don't know, ma'am. I'm not
Well,
going to
how
make up a
do
timeline.
we, as Congress, do our budget and our work without that request and without the spend plan?
Well, ma'am, I'm here. I'm
don't
doing the
care.
best I can. I can't make up answers. I'm going to commit to you to work on getting you the information you need.
That is insufficient and deeply disturbing. No response?
I've given my response.
Well, the FBI is already down 1,900 employees since 2023 as a direct result of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And under the Trump administration, FBI agents, analysts, linguists, cyber experts, and scientists are being asked to do a lot more in order to keep us safe. Director Patel, we all know that budget cuts will reduce the FBI's ability to counter threats of terrorism, and it will hinder its ability to keep pace with firearm background checks and shutter operations that combat violent crime, drugs, gangs, and transnational organized crime. Now, I understand that you told our House colleagues yesterday that you don't want to reduce the FBI workforce, meaning that you disagree with what President Trump is proposing?
No, I agree that we can sustain the mission with the proposed budget, and I agree with the budget. And as I said yesterday, I believe that what I said was I can do more with more. And I gave examples of what more we could do if we were given more.
Well, it's different than what you told the House yesterday. So what are you communicating to the President and the White House about what you need and what, and again, we don't have a budget request from you, so I'm not sure what you're asking us for.
I'm not asking you for anything at this time.
You can operate without a budget?
I never said that.
Well, this is unprecedented. Okay, well, let me just go to another topic since you're not going to answer that. The FBI partners with state, local, and tribal law enforcement organizations. They provide critical intelligence and operational capabilities to combat violent crime and gangs and terrorist threats, fentanyl trafficking, challenges that our local communities really can't face alone. I'm going to give you an example. A few years ago, the Southeast Washington Safe Streets FBI Task Force worked with our Benton County and Franklin County Sheriff's Office, multiple Tri-Cities Police Departments, and the State Corrections Department to carry out one of the largest ever drug seizures in the region's history. Now we've got an administration already cutting more than $800 million in assistance in 2025 to local law enforcement organizations while proposing a $500 million cut for the FBI. Director Patel, can you explain to this committee how cutting resources for our local law enforcement partner agencies the FBI relies on to help your bureau keep safe? How do you expect the FBI and local law enforcement to do more without those significant resources they need?
The FBI will continue to do what it does, which is work with embedded state and local law enforcement officers in our Joint Terrorism Task Force, in our Safe Streets Task Force, in our gang task forces. Those are a priority. Those billets have been maintained. Those billets have not been reduced. And with my reorientation, reprogramming that we've notified Congress to, you will see an augmentation in the field in every single state in this country.
Well, again, we need to see the numbers and we need to see that budget from you. Let me ask you about the NICS system. The FBI is really on the front lines of keeping guns out of the hands of very dangerous criminals. The NICS serves a really critical role in enhancing national security and public safety by conducting background checks. You know this. They are supported by the vast majority of American people, and I wanted to ask you this morning, will you commit to continuing to fund and run the FBI background check system?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to ask one final question here, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk again about how the FBI is focusing its resources. President Trump has turned the Department of Justice into a tool to go after his perceived enemies, and many of the actions we have now seen at the FBI are alarming. The FBI has reassigned and pushed out career FBI agents for political reasons. We have seen fear and intimidation promoted throughout the Bureau, including by polygraphing your own staff. We've seen the arrest of a sitting judge in Wisconsin. And during your confirmation hearing, you committed that there would be no politicization, no retribution at the FBI under your leadership. You've reportedly placed FBI employees responsible for investigation January 6 cases on leave. Is that keeping up your promise of no politicization, no retribution?
It is, because that's wildly inaccurate. Let me tell you what the FBI has done since I got there. 8,276 federal arrests, to 820 kilograms seized of fentanyl. That's enough to kill 250,000 people, over 3,000 firearms seized, 350 gang cases, 3,000 cases against violent
Well,
criminals.
that's not my question. We know that you...
Well, you asked if I was weaponizing the FBI, and I am not. I'm giving you the hard, concrete examples of the men and women putting handcuffs on bad people, doing harm to our children and innocent Americans. I do not see weaponization.
You have placed on leave FBI employees responsible for the investigation of January 6th. That sounds political to me.
I have not placed anyone on leave who has not violated their ethical obligation or their oath to the Constitution.
So if they were investigating January 6th, you believe they were violating an ethical obligation?
Nope. I think the common theme here is you putting words in my mouth, and I'm not going to tolerate it, nor will the men and women of the FBI.
Well, you did place on leave an analyst responsible for investigating Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. Is that politicization? Is that retribution?
No, not if she broke the law or the ethical guidelines. I don't know which case you're talking about, but that's the standard. And we will hold ourselves inwardly accountable, and we will not be strayed from our mission because people think we are politicizing the Bureau. If you want to talk about someone who was attacked by a weaponized Bureau, you're looking at him. And now he's the director of the FBI, and he's cleaning it up.
Well, I would just say to everyone who's listening that the FBI needs to be focused on its mission to keep the entire country safe. It should not be weaponized for partisan political gain. Thank you,
We are.
Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Director, worry not, we'll make sure your agency is adequately funded. This judge you arrested in Wisconsin, she was breaking federal law, wasn't she?
Yes, that's why we arrested her.
She was helping an illegal immigrant escape being taken into custody. Is that right?
Yes, and the field agents decided to open the case, work the case.
And as Americans, do we get to pick and choose which laws we want to follow?
We do not.
If you're a state court judge, do you get to decide you don't want to follow federal law?
No.
And if you violate federal law, you get arrested, don't you?
Yes, Senator.
That's called equal treatment under the law, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
You remember Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, don't you?
Yes, Senator.
Mr. Strzok worked for the FBI, Mr. Strzok worked for the FBI. I think Ms. Page worked for Justice. The Inspector General found in its investigation that they hated President Trump and they really wanted Secretary Clinton to win. Is that true?
That's correct, sir.
And this would be the same same Ms. Page who sent an email to Mr. Strzok with whom she was having an affair. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And Mr. Strzok with the FBI, senior official at the FBI replied, quote, no, he won't. We'll stop it. Did I read that correctly?
You did, Senator.
Okay. Now, Ms. Page got quit before she could get fired. Mr. Strzok was fired. And predictably, they filed a lawsuit because in Washington, it's easier to divorce your spouse than it is to fire a federal employee. Why did the FBI give Mr. Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Page $800,000 to settle a lawsuit?
Senator, I do not know that settlement was reached in the prior administration.
Who made the decision?
The prior Department of Justice.
Who in the prior Department of Justice?
The settlement for that kind of case can only come from the Attorney General, which would be Attorney General Merrick Garland.
So the Attorney General decided to give Mr. Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Page $800,000 after they were fired after actively interfering in the 2016 election. Is that right?
My understanding is that was a settlement they agreed to.
Pass me the sick bucket, please. The Hunter Biden laptop. In October of 2016, shortly before the election, the New York Post wrote a story that was widely covered talking about Mr. Hunter Biden's influence peddling scheme based on his laptop. A couple of weeks later, Secretary of State, soon to be Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, organized a group of 51 so-called intelligence experts. Had some real rock stars on the list. Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Michael Hayden, Leon Panetta, and they said, oh, no, the story in the New York Post is not true. It's based on Russian disinformation. You remember that?
I do, Senator, as the lead investigator for Russiagate for the House Intel Committee.
Yeah. The FBI had the laptop for 10 months, hadn't they?
They did, Senator.
So the FBI knew right before the election that it wasn't Russian disinformation, didn't they?
And that was confirmed by the Inspector General's report.
Yeah. Who at the FBI refused to let the FBI tell the American people the truth?
I don't have that name in front of me, sir.
Well, would you look?
I will, sir.
I'd like to know. I'd like a name, not a division. I'd like the name. Person with a brain and a beating heart.
Yes, sir.
Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him?
Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Are you going to release all the information about that?
Senator, we are working through that right now with the Department of Justice.
When do you think you'll have it done, Kash?
I think in the near future, sir.
Like before I die?
Senator, we've been working on that, and we're doing it in a way that protects victims and also doesn't put out into the ether information that is irrelevant for production of the public, such as CSAM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. As you're well aware, DOGE is going through and seizing a significant amount of information from different federal agencies. There are multiple lawsuits challenging the legality of this. Their goal, as they admitted, is to develop a single centralized data center which would have vast amounts of data which could be used for very malign purposes. But first, can you give us assurance that every one of those DOGE workers has the appropriate clearance to see this information?
As far as it relates to the FBI, I can.
But not the other agencies?
Well, I don't know who's where, Senator. I'd have to look.
Well, don't you think it'd be pretty important to look if there is a chance that this is a violation of multiple laws?
Well, Senator, what we do is everyone that is employed at any agency that we own the security clearance process adjudication for, we make sure we adjudicate it appropriately beforehand.
Who would be responsible for the other agencies? The agency itself?
The agency itself.
Have you received instructions from the White House to you and every other agency to ensure the security clearances of these individuals?
For me, as it relates to who we control, yeah, we adjudicate the security clearance.
Did you get an instruction from the White House to do that?
To make sure they have their security clearances? No, I don't need an instruction, I just do it.
Has there been instructions to other agencies?
It's less so an instruction whether it's DOGE or a new hire or whatnot. If they're getting a security clearance, they go through a process.
Well, the bottom line is you, in your position, cannot assure us that all the people that are dealing with this information, because it's vast across the whole government, have the appropriate clearances. Do you know where this information is located when it's removed from federal sites?
What information? The BI information, Senator?
All the information they're picking up from the Department of Treasury, the Department of Agriculture. As you know, DOGE is working through every federal agency.
Well, again, Senator, it depends on who the adjudicator is for the clearance. If we, the FBI, are for that individual or individuals, we maintain it in our BI system.
So they cannot take the information from the FBI. It has to remain in your system. I'm talking about DOGE. When DOGE employees walk into your computers, get on their computers, with their own computers, I've been told, where does that information go?
As far as I'm tracking for the FBI, nobody's bringing in outside computers to do anything.
But is that the case throughout the government?
Well, I can't speak for every other agency. I just don't know, sir.
Once this information is, and in some cases it's been clear in press reports that it is leaving the premises and of the agency, if this information is all consolidated as the suggestion is, what protections are there for the American people against the misuse of this information?
Well, again, I can't speak to other agencies and how they hold their information. I'm not familiar with it. As far as the FBI is concerned, we hold all information for BIs in one place, and it is not accessible.
Now, you're the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, practically speaking, and you're not interested in ensuring that the data of millions and millions of Americans are not absolutely secure?
I am, but I cannot tell the Department of Homeland Security how to handle their data. That's for the DHS secretary. I'm not permitted by law to
What
do
law,
that.
what law prevents that? If you believe there's a crime that's being committed?
If there's a crime that's being committed, that's a separate instance, Senator. You're just talking about holding data.
No, I'm talking about holding data that someone should not have access to, and in a place and a location it should not be located at with would, in my view, constitute.
In that hypothetical, if a law was being broken, our line agents would open up a case.
Have you opened up a case?
But we're speaking about a hypothetical, so I don't know.
No,
if
no,
there's a
we're
specific
speaking about DOGE, which is operating every day, collecting information, putting that information together with, I think, malicious intent, because it's not an agency that's saving a lot of money. And it could be used to defraud Americans. It could be used to interfere with our voting systems. It could be used many ways. And if we don't get a handle on it now, and you're the chief federal law enforcement officer, I think we're going to see some very, very adverse results. And I would hope you would get to look at this and investigate this immediately and take appropriate actions. Thank you.
Senator Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Patel, thank you for being here today, and thank you for joining me at FBI Redstone in Huntsville last month. The work that the men and women of the FBI are doing to combat violent crime, terrorism, and other threats has never been more important. I am proud to work with you and proud to see the work you're already doing to reduce the FBI footprint in DC and streamline FBI's operation and reallocation personnel to FBI Redstone. As you know, Redstone Arsenal is the epicenter of the FBI's technological capabilities and advanced training. Fully leveraging Redstone Arsenal's cutting-edge capabilities sends a message to our enemies that the FBI and its leadership is back to prioritizing the pressing threats to our homeland. I am grateful that you not only made filling seats at Redstone an immediate priority, one of the first acts that you did as FBI director, but that you also made visiting it as well. While you were there, I know you got to see the Terrorism Explosive Device Center, better known as TDAC, or the Ballistic Missile Research Facility, the Improvised Explosive Detection and Synthesis Center, and we received a demonstration from the FBI's Counter-Unmanned Aircraft Systems. The FBI's presence on the ground at Redstone continues to grow. The FBI Redstone footprint is about 2,050 people. At least 1,800 personnel will transition down over the next few years as new facilities continue to open. So my question is simple. Can I have your commitment to ensuring strategic investment in Redstone will continue, and what do you need to make that happen?
Thank you, Senator. Redstone's one of the jewels that the FBI has, and actually the deputy director's there all day today. It's our commitment to make sure the interagency, along with America, sees what we're doing and gets trained there, because the facilities you cited don't exist for the interagency anywhere else. We have them at the FBI. And so we need to continue the plans that you and your predecessors have laid out through the appropriations process to complete the buildings on the South Campus and to allow for more individuals to be there on a temporary and permanent basis, specifically the rescission and the O&M budgetary requirements, and then in the future, adding for the correct appropriation to complete what has already been initiated on the South Campus, including the plotting and mapping.
Absolutely. And I think you would agree that ensuring our FBI agents and professional staff have the best training in accordance with federal law has to be a priority. I have seen you already begin to transform the FBI, taking it back to its original mission. You said in front of the Judiciary Committee during your confirmation, you wanted to let good cops be cops. You wanted to get back to protecting American citizens, and we see you doing that every day. It's important that the FBI be in a position, though, to continue to build out its capability at Redstone Arsenal. And as a senator from Alabama, I am obviously committed to making that happen. You know, that being the case, you mentioned obviously the plans, but will you commit to working with me on all of the construction projects that are planned at FBI Redstone and that they're sustained and completed, that we have an open dialogue about what's actually needed so that we can understand that? We want to make sure that our FBI agents are the best trained, equipped, and ready of anyone across the planet. And is there anything additional you need from Congress to ensure that the FBI's operational goals are met long-term? We would like to be your partner.
Well, you absolutely have my commitment and the commitment of the Bureau. And we are just going to need to continue to work together to make sure, one, people see what we're doing at Redstone, and two, contingency requests that are now coming in from our partners at CIA, at DHS, at CBP to come there and train, and to also recognize the importance of facilities like the Bomb Technical Center, where every SABT in the country and every bomb technician is trained. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
That's right.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. We just need to finish it, and you have my commitment to finish it.
Absolutely. And last but not least, can you tell us a little bit about the men and women that you have an opportunity to serve with there in the FBI and what it's been like over the last few months for you?
Thank you, Senator. It's been unbelievably awe-inspiring. When you go to places like Redstone or when I go to any field office across the country, all they want to do is the work that they signed up to do. They want to do the mission. They want to keep our kids safe. They want to protect the homeland. They want to put violent criminals in jail, like we're doing in Operation Restore Justice this week and so many operations across the country. And so my commitment to them and to you is to make sure they get the resources they need and the training, the continued training. That's the key with our Redstone Arsenal. While we have Quantico for our new agents and new intel analysts, where we send them to get advanced training only occurs at Redstone.
Thank you.
Senator Merkley.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Director Patel. And so as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us to, what are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission and am in support of the budget here, and I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay. Well, we've got those two options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today so that we can give it the appropriate consideration. Mm-hmm. Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the freedom clause of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution? It says all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process
Yeah,
pursuant.
that's what the Constitution says. It
It
says no
doesn't
person.
say that.
It does say no person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it.
I-
Because it's
I
also
read it
been
every day.
affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. On the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status, the Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected, therefore it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation, and you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No, you and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try to uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me
I'm
close
doing.
with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
Will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely, send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, good morning. This is a week that a lot of Alaskans are paying attention to. Monday was the day that we recognize the missing, murdered Indigenous women and Girls Awareness Day. I've just been going through the morning clips. You've been testifying, of course, but this morning, and there's accounts in Anchorage and Juneau and Fairbanks and marches in Nome, all recounting very painful stories that families have endured of their family members that have gone missing. Law enforcement just was not present for a host of different reasons. You and I talked about this prior to your confirmation. And it's something that I have been working on for a period of years now. We've made some good progress under the first Trump administration. There was a focus called Operation Lady Justice, and now I'm pleased to see that we have this expanded to what you're calling Operation Not Forgotten, to look into unresolved violent crimes in Indian country, including cases involving missing, murdered Indigenous persons. I'm looking critically at the budget here and wondering if you can share with me how the budget request, or what we have of it at this point in time, will support this expansion of Operation Not Forgotten. I need to be able to give folks back home the comfort that they need to know that these cases that have gone cold for not just months and years, but decades, will not be dropped, that push for closure will continue. What can you share with me this morning?
Senator, I greatly appreciate you highlighting and being a champion of crimes on Indian country. And just this week, I was the first FBI director in U.S. history to sit down at the Department of Interior with the tribal leaders at the stat level. And I also met privately with the parents of Emily Pike, who was tragically butchered on a reservation in Arizona. And her parents asked me to find the remains the remaining pieces of her body that have not been returned. She's a 14-year-old girl. She's still missing her arms. They only have her torso. What I told them, and what I hope you take back to Alaska and what the rest of the tribal community hears, is that every crime in this country will be treated equally. Those that happen on Indian country and those that are happening to Native Americans are just as horrific as are happening in the rest of the world, in the rest of America. And we've already prioritized resources on our in our state-level task forces to address these matters, and I asked the staff to allow FBI agents onto the reservations on a more regular basis and engage with them directly. I also invited the community leaders to nominate a law enforcement officer from one of the tribal jurisdictions to sit with me at the Hoover Building in the FBI, so we have a direct engagement with the community. And so we are, just one highlight, I think in Wind River, we executed an operation that took down, I can't remember how many dozens of pounds of fentanyl that was heading to an Indian reservation. So you have my commitment that we will not forget it.
Well, thank you for that broader commitment. As you know, of course, we don't have reservations in Alaska. We don't have the same type of tribal law enforcement presence, so some unique aspects of it. My understanding is that the Alaska field office in Anchorage, along with the two satellite offices that we have, one in Fairbanks and one in Juneau, they have one FBI victim service coordinator to communicate with these families. This has been part of the problem. It's radio silence out of the agency. They don't know whether a case is being pursued. They hear nothing. So I would ask that you look, as you're looking at your budget, to make sure that the FBI does include support for victim service coordinators on this. It's a gap that is missing right now. Very quickly, we also talked about the fentanyl crisis in Alaska. We're the one state that is tragically going the wrong way when it comes to fentanyl deaths. We had a 40% increase in fentanyl deaths in 2023. So you had indicated that you were going to be doing aggressive work here. We need to be doing more, and I've shared that it ought to be easier to intercept drugs coming into Alaska because they come by airplane, they come through the mail, and they occasionally come in by boat. Maybe a little bit driving across through the border. But we've got the ability to do the interception, and right now our numbers are not going down. I just ask for your continued commitment with this. We know we're seeing FBI partnering with ICE for arrests and detentions of immigrants in Alaska. Folks are asking me, they're saying, are we using FBI resources, redirecting them from the fentanyl crisis to perhaps pursuing those who have been targeted immigrants, even though they're not violent criminals. So I'd love to have further conversation with you on some of these Alaska specifics, but we gotta start turning that corner on fentanyl.
Yes, ma'am, and I think you know this, and we're sending a plus up to Alaska in part of this movement out to the field, and we'll look to address those specific issues, and I will work with you in your office to make sure that Alaska is not forgotten and that we emphasize it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, welcome to the committee here.
Hello, sir.
Director, I've long been a supporter of Project Safe Neighborhoods. It's a program that brings together all levels of law enforcement in the communities that they serve to make our neighborhoods safer for everyone. These successful networks often work very closely with the FBI. In fact, in Michigan, just last year, the FBI played a key role in cases brought as part of Project Safe Neighborhoods, including 2 cases involving convicted felons possessing firearms with high-capacity magazines. Under the law, broad bipartisan support that Senator Cornyn and I wrote and passed back in 2018. Funds for this program, though, are locally controlled. Local control is a big part of it to address the problems that are identified locally and then addressed accordingly. This includes local police departments in Michigan, the things that they're dealing with day to day on the ground. And the current statute actually emphasizes local control to every extent possible. So I was concerned that the Trump administration seems to want to bring these funds under national rather than local control. Earlier this year, the acting Deputy Attorney General issued a memo in which he directed the program should establish a national initiative to focus on immigration-related prosecutions. So my question for you, Director, is can you help me understand how the Trump administration believes it has the authority to direct from Washington how these local funds should be used?
The only thing I can help you understand is how FBI funds are utilized, Senator. I don't have the ability to comment on how the Department of Justice moves its money around.
Are you supportive of shifting control of funding from local recipients to the national folks?
Generally speaking, at least with the FBI, I'm very supportive of directly engaging with local level law enforcement to get the job done.
So can I get your help in making sure that local folks continue to get these resources and work closely with your folks in local communities? Has been a very successful program. I'd like to be able to work with you to make sure that it continues to have local control.
You can, and I'll talk to the Department of Justice on it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Director, for the last decade, the threat from domestic terrorists, and in particular from white supremacists and anti-government militias, has remained unfortunately persistent. In the last 10 years, no category of terrorist has killed more Americans in the U.S. Than white supremacists. And yet there are reports that you have reassigned agents away from the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section, which supports investigations run out of the FBI's 55 field offices, as you know, and provides information on domestic threats. And as we understand, there's also consideration of disbanding that unit entirely, and that the FBI has currently discontinued a practice of tagging investigations with connections to domestic terrorism. The administration has also tasked federal law enforcement agencies with prioritizing immigration enforcement over other responsibilities. So the question I have for you, Director, is do you consider domestic terrorism an ongoing threat to Americans?
I do.
So do you intend to disband the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section?
No.
Appreciate that. Director, in February, you announced the disbandment of the Foreign Influence Task Force, which was dedicated to identifying and counteracting foreign malign influence targeting our domestic institutions, with a specific focus on securing our elections against foreign interference. Director Patel, could you tell me why you disbanded the task force?
Just to clarify, Senator, I didn't disband it. That happened before I got to the FBI.
That happened before you were there?
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, now that the task force has been disbanded, happened before you, how will the FBI work to protect our elections from foreign adversaries?
In my opinion, based on the almost 3 months I've been there has been no gap in terms of how we cover down on foreign adversarial impact to all sectors of our society. And the folks that were doing the work that were on the said task force are still doing the work.
Why do we not have a task force then? Is it something if you're there now, you could put it back together? Is that something you'd consider, or?
I believe that was a interagency task force, so I don't have the ability to just put that back on.
Would you support doing that and work with the other agencies?
I'd have to look at it, Senator, and I'm happy to do so. I'm just not the expert on the fit.
Okay. Well, I'll be reaching out to your office if we could have that conversation. I'd appreciate it.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Coons.
Thank you very much, Chair and Ranking, and thank you, Director Patel. I appreciate your being here today. I'm the co-chair of the Law Enforcement Caucus in the Senate with Senator Cornyn, and as someone who had responsibility for the second largest law enforcement in my admittedly small state, for the decade before I came here, I got to see the importance of the FBI as a training resource, as a critical technical and law enforcement partner for state and local law enforcement in my state. Just this past year, in November, the FBI and Delaware law enforcement successfully investigated and arrested an individual who was leading a human trafficking ring. Just a reminder of how federal, state, local partnership can make a huge difference. We're here at the Appropriations Committee. As best I understand where we are, you have not submitted an appropriations request. What we've got from the administration is a so-called skinny budget, just a few sentences, and it asks for $545 million in cuts to the FBI, I believe you testified yesterday to House Appropriations that you would request 11.1 billion. The administration's request is 10.1 billion. I'm familiar with the dynamics of differences between what agencies could productively use and what administrations request. But I'll be blunt, I'm concerned about the trajectory the administration has taken on funding law enforcement. DOGE cut, through the Office of Justice Programs at DOJ, 365 grants totaling more than $800 million. And they were not all DEI or climate change or things that didn't support the president's agenda. They cut grants that aided victims of crime, violent crime investigators programs, programs combating child abuse. I am not in any way suggesting that you were responsible for that. I'm just saying there seems to me to be a tension between those of us who want to robustly support federal law enforcement and the absence of any request from you here today. Will you return to this committee for us to have an appropriations hearing once there is actually a budget request from the FBI?
I will speak to, this being my first go-around, Senator, I'll speak to the Department of Justice and circle back with you on that.
Please, because bluntly at your confirmation hearing, you answered questions from Senator Padilla, Senator Britt about the urgency of retaining your workforce, investing in training. I believe you testified yesterday that if the budget request submitted by the administration was enacted, you'd have to lay off 1,300 agents. Is that accurate?
There's a little more nuance to it than that. The folks that have taken what we call the fork in the road initiatives have filled that number in terms of how many would have to be quote unquote laid off. And then there's the
leave federal service, which is an important reduction in the force that you have available to you to fight crime.
Right. But those folks have already entered that program or are in it now.
I look forward to getting an actual appropriations request from the administration and to going over it with you. Let me just renew one other specific question. Eligibility for the FERS annuity supplement. FERS is the Federal Employees Retirement System. If in fact the reconciliation bill that the House Oversight Committee is considering removes eligibility, this would deprive thousands of agents of tens of thousands of dollars a year in earned benefits. And would have a real impact on early retirement and on recruitment and retention. What are you doing about this threat to the FERS retirement benefit eligibility?
Senator, one of your colleagues asked me a similar question, and I will get back to you on that, specifics of what's happening with FERS.
One of my top priorities, as we discussed before, is preventing IP theft, particularly from the CCP. They've been particularly aggressive at stealing America's inventions and innovations. I was pleased to see you reference this in your testimony. What's the FBI doing to address threats to American inventions and innovation? And would an increase in funding allow increased efforts in this area?
Taking that in reverse order, with more money, we can do more, Senator, put simply. But when it comes to all things CCP, it is, if not the #1 priority every day, it's almost the #1 priority every day, especially when it comes to what they're stealing from us, both on the IP side and the agricultural side. So we have rededicated more FBI personnel to investigate how they are doing that. And I'm also working with both the private and public sector engagements, because we don't at the FBI possess the capabilities alone to suss out what they're doing and how they're doing and blocking it. So
well, that's something I think is a critical and important initiative for you and for your agency. We also talked about FISA reform. In April of last year, the Senate reauthorized FISA Section 702 for 2 additional years and codified some of the FBI's internal reforms. And those reforms were a big reason why, for the first time ever, I voted in reauthorization of Section 702, about which I've had some real concerns. Can you give us some update on the FBI's implementation of these reforms and tell us what changes to Section 02 you might anticipate requesting when it comes up for reauthorization next year?
I can tell you that we have been, as a former terrorism prosecutor and a member of the IC who has used 702 successfully, and as a former public defender who has stood up for violations of civil rights and constitutional violations, it's a delicate balance for me. I am for the renewal of Section 702 with the modifications that have already been made and have some ideas about how to make it better going forward. And in terms of how we've ingested the changes to 702 that were put in before I got here, I look back at the statistics and I'll get them to you, the concrete ones, but I think prior to the changes made, there was hundreds of misuses of 702 internally, and now we have found one, which we believe was an actual mistake. So I think we're trending in the right direction. And I understand the concerns about, 702 queries against U.S. citizens. I also understand the challenge when it comes to search warrants versus lifetime action, and that's something we're just going to have to work with you on.
Well, this is an important balance I look forward to hearing from you about and working with you on. You've also testified just yesterday in front of House Appropriations that you are orienting the FBI looking forward. There won't be any actions against FBI agents based on what they did in terms of carrying out assignments to investigate January 6 incidents. During your confirmation, you said there will be no retribution taken by the FBI should you be confirmed as director. James Dennehy, who was head of the New York field office, has been forced out, received no reason for his removal, but had resisted efforts to turn over a list of agents involved in January 6 investigations. That's how I've understood the characterization of his separation, and that sounds to me like politicization and retribution for involvement in January 6th. I just want to hear your statement about where you see any disciplinary actions related to January 6th investigations.
Thank you, Senator. With the ongoing litigation related to the specific list, there's only so much I can talk about, but I can tell you this with affirmation. No one on any list will be punished at the FBI. As someone who was given case assignments I didn't want many times over, you don't get punished for your case assignments. You only get punished if you didn't do the job and fail to follow the ethical guidelines and break the law, and that's the standard.
The Judiciary Committee recently had two career prosecutors in front of them who were dismissed explicitly for their involvement in prosecuting January 6 cases. I understand that's not the FBI. I hope to work with you on ensuring that we orient the FBI forward. In February, I did join all my judiciary colleagues to send then Acting Director Driscoll letters about proposed purges of agents for simply carrying out their assignments. Do you know if you've answered that letter?
I'll have to check, Senator, sorry.
I'll tell you that I haven't received a response, and I expect a response. More importantly, I expect a budget and appropriations request so we can do our job as the relevant appropriations subcommittee. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Coons, I'm the one who inquired about FERS and the change in 3 years to 5 years and what the consequences could be, and I appreciate Director Patel's follow-up on that, but I'd indicate to you that that has, if implemented, that is a very damaging thing to the law enforcement beyond, the federal law enforcement agents beyond the FBI, into the DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and others, as senior agents who are eligible to retire today will retire tomorrow, and our agencies will be shortchanged significantly. So I look forward to working with you and others.
Thank you, Senator. I'm very concerned about what the so-called skinny budget portends in terms of cuts to ATF, to DEA, to FBI, and this particular move would accelerate the loss of the most seasoned and capable agents across all these critical federal law enforcement agencies. I look forward to working.
I would compliment Director Patel when we ask him to testify, and I indicated earlier it's always been my goal to have all those agencies testify in front of our committee. We've done it before at the same time. We'll try to do it at separate times, but I'd like to hear from U.S. Marshals, ATF, and DEA. And Director Patel was diligent enough to indicate he would accept our invitation to testify with the permission of the Department of Justice, which he received. And it's unusual for the FBI director to testify before the Attorney General testifies. So again, I thank him for his willingness to come speak. It's not his fault that we have a skinny budget to look at. And we wanted to get every piece of information we could as early as we could, even though the budgetary process and now the appropriations process is disjointed and things are lacking.
Disjointed is being generous, Senator.
I'm a generous person.
Indeed you are, sir.
Let's see. We're going to, I don't anticipate a second round, but Senator Van Hollen and I have a couple of follow-up questions, and then we'll conclude the hearing. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to pick up on Senator Kuhn's point, yours, I mean, this is a budget hearing with missing documents. I mean, we don't have a budget for the FBI before us. We have this one little paragraph. We don't have the spending plans for the remainder of this fiscal year 2025. I did think I heard you say, Mr. Director, in response to an earlier question from Senator Moran, with respect to the $545 million cuts, that you had identified those cuts. Did I hear you correctly about that?
The $545 million cuts?
Yeah.
Those are largely the,
Have you identified what those, how you would achieve those cuts?
oh, I think for the most part we have, Senator.
Okay, so that, I would ask you to immediately provide that information, Director Patel, to the committee. That's exactly the kind of information that we usually get as part of the justification. Can you, since you've identified those cuts, can you make sure we get them right away?
As soon as I can get them to you, sir.
Well, when can't you give them today? Why can you not give them to us today? You say you identified them.
I've said I've identified most of them as soon as I'm done, and
No, okay, I you wrote it down, said you identified it already. So you're not finished identifying the five. I'm just.
Yeah, I said I've
I'm just
identified.
trying to understand the situation. You have to understand that this committee is a budget committee, appropriations committee. We don't have any of the documents. You said in response to a question that you identified the.
Most of them. Once I'm done, I'll get them to you.
Okay. When you expect to be done?
We will work as diligently as we can, sir.
All right. Let me, I do want to follow up on some of the questions that Senator Merkley raised on the Constitution, because as you know, in response to a question that the President was asked about whether he had to comply with the Constitution, he said, and I'm quoting, "I don't know." So it is important that we reaffirm everybody's obligation to comply with the Constitution, and I appreciate that was your answer broadly to the question asked by Senator Merkley. But you don't dispute the fact, and I'm quoting here from the Supreme Court opinion in Reno v. Flores, where Justice Scalia wrote, and I quote, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in deportation proceedings," end of quote. You don't
I don't dispute that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, for the record, we understand that, because as you well know, the federal courts have found that there have been gross violations to date of many individuals' due process rights. Let me ask you a question about Judge Dugan, and I'm not going to get into about Judge Dugan, who was arrested, taken out in handcuffs from her courtroom. You agree that as director of the FBI, you should lead by example, right?
Try to.
Okay. Well, there's a confidentiality and media contacts policy within the Department of Justice guidelines that says specifically that DOJ personnel should not voluntarily disclose a photograph of a defendant unless it serves a law enforcement function, or unless the photograph is already part of the public record in the case. Clearly, Judge Dugan's photograph was not already part of the public record in the case. So it appears that what you did was a violation of that policy, unless you can express a clear law enforcement purpose for having done that.
The simple law enforcement purpose is to show America that we investigate any individual who commits a crime, especially those in positions of public trust.
But do you agree with the presumption of innocence in the U.S. system?
Absolutely. As a public defender, that's what I fought for years.
Well,
but that's different than
No,
this.
but Mr. Director, this is one of the reasons why that guideline is there, so people, especially the director of the FBI, doesn't announce to the country that somebody's already been found criminally liable when they haven't. She hasn't, has she?
But that's not what we said, that she was criminally liable. We said she was arrested and showed it.
Yeah, we know she was arrested, but the issue is the photograph. I'm asking you, going forward, I hope as the leader of the FBI, you will comply with the guidelines of the FBI that everybody else is expected to follow.
I believe I have, and I will going forward.
Well, this seems like a direct violation of this guideline.
I guess we're in disagreement, Senator.
Well, unless you can tell me why that really serves a law enforcement function. So you're going to send out pictures of everybody that's arrested?
Lots of people that are arrested have pictures sent out.
I'm asking you as director of the FBI, is that going to be your policy, just to start sending?
No, we do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, well, the guidelines make clear that I think any normal interpretation of this suggests it's a violation. Look, we want to, we're a budget committee, an appropriations committee. We want to find a way to make sure that we properly resource the men and women who work at the FBI. I think that is a common goal, I hope. And I do just, Mr. Chairman, again, in closing, I understand you want to proceed, just so that we keep things going, but it is kind of hard to proceed without any budget. So
I don't take you as critiquing our having a hearing.
No,
You're pleased to have a hearing, and I wish we had more to deal with than we do.
I do.
And we'll work to get more information as the administration completes its budget. But in the meantime, let's figure out what we need to know based upon what facts are available before us, what presentation is available for us today. And I thank you for working together to accomplish that goal. Just a couple of follow-ups. I want to hear a few comments on regarding the movement of agents outside of Washington, D.C. First of all, the task force that the FBI are involved in with state and local law enforcement are hugely important. And I assume those task forces can be enhanced and more frequent if we have more agents closer to where the local law enforcement is investigating and pursuing criminals. So we should see an increase in FBI participation in partnership with local law enforcement as a result of this change in policy. Is that true?
That's a huge piece of it, Senator.
Anything you want to more fully tell me?
Sure. So I didn't have an opportunity to discuss it, but the way we set about this reprogramming or push to the field is not just by throwing darts on a map. We had the careers at the FBI identify the violent crime hotbeds across America based on violent crime statistics, and then we apportioned the approximately 1,500 or so FBI employees against those statistics to cover down immediately based on an apportionment cycle where the need is most and highest. And within the folks going out into the field, as you identified, it will be up to the field level SACs to determine which task force they go into, which agencies they embed with, and who they invite to embed with them. So that's a big part of the process is state and local commitment to state and local authorities that we're not just sending a federal agent to do work alone, we're sending them to do it with you.
That makes sense to me, and I thank you for that change in policy. Let me highlight for you the nature of the state of Kansas and its rural characteristics. And I would highlight that I hope that you would agree that all that reallocation will not necessarily occur to the primary field office in the state, but take into account other resident agents. We have 4 in our state of Kansas: Garden City, Manhattan, Wichita, and Topeka. Those offices are worthy of that kind of support as well. And so while you're decentralizing Washington, I don't want to shortchange the field office, but I also want to make sure the field office doesn't then shortchange the other aspects of law enforcement in our state.
You hit on one of the most important things I told my team when we're doing this. We're not sending more agents to LA just because it's LA. We have to cover down on geography, and every one of your offices and RAs that you mentioned is getting a plus up because that's the only way to cover down on geography. So we're pushing them out not just to the SAC field offices, but we're pushing them out to the RAs specifically to cover down on what you just highlighted.
That's very pleasing to know and to hear. Garden City, for example, is 400 miles from Kansas City. And Garden City has its unique circumstances, its location on interstate, and it's the nature of the community and the workforce and the volume of drugs across our state, not just in the cities, and the violent crime in communities across our state. So thank you. And it's also perhaps hard to recruit to those small towns. And so what you're doing, as I understand, is not forcibly moving someone to, you're creating the vacancy in a different place and then trying to fill that vacancy. And I just highlight there's sometimes challenges to find agents, I assume, who will want to work in smaller communities distant from the cities.
What we're finding out is that when, agents now know that the opportunity to make promotions is going to be based on largely on casework in the field, when we put this out on a volunteer basis initially and understanding that people have families and we want to uproot people, striking that balance, we found a lot of folks willing to jump in and say, send me wherever. I just want to do the work.
That's great to hear. I need our concluding remarks. Director, I try to give witnesses in front of committees that I chair the opportunity to augment, reformulate, correct anything that they said, add to their testimony. Is there anything that you'd like to say further than what you've said already?
Just that I appreciate the committee's time in helping me navigate my first budget appropriations cycle. I realize that the answers, I hope you realize that the answers were given to the best of my ability. And I hope I expressed my willingness to work with everyone on the committee to make it better all around.
We look forward to taking you up on that request and your availability. If there are no other further questions, and there are not, senators may submit additional questions for the subcommittee's official hearing record, and we request the FBI's response within 30 days.
Yes, sir.
The subcommittee now stands adjourned, recessed to the call of the chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jay's gonna go check it out.